right, so tonight we have Chloe. So Chloe Machida is a film editor born and raised in Honolulu. Since graduating from the University of Hawaii with a bachelor's in creative media, she has worked as a photographer, wedding videographer, and has edited for Levi's, Hawaiian Airlines, Zippy's, Central Pacific Bank, and the American Cancer Society, among others. So take it away, Chloe.
Thanks, Priscilla. Yeah, hello everyone. Good to see your faces. So the goal of tonight is really gonna just to get you guys some hands-on practice on editing professional photos. I was just like Priscilla, I know for me, when I would watch YouTube videos, sometimes I'm like watching the video and I'm like, yeah. And then I try it myself and I'm like, shoot, I forget, or like, I don't know, or it's like, there's a disconnect. So hopefully the goal is for like us to edit, but then you guys to try it on your own. And it's probably not going to be perfect, but just so that you guys can get a feel for like the tools, so that you can try it later on your own photos. So yeah, everyone coming in, if you can open up Lightroom and download those raw photos. So just a quick overview. We're going to cover editing steps, just like my basic approach, but feel free to, take it and tweak it. Editing is just very subjective. So this is just the way I do it personally, but if you find a better way that works for you, then, totally do that. And then in between the steps, we're going to practice. So like some steps, practice, and that'll be the main chunk of tonight. And then at the very end, I'll give some like how-to tips for some popular looks, like the visco faded look, like light and airy, just like tips on how to get that. And those you can just screenshot and try on your own at a later time, but those are just like tips to get you started. Because I know before I'd see these looks and I'd be like, how do they get there? Like my look looks like this and that looks like that. How do they get there? So those are just tools to start. But before we actually start, I kind of wanted to just get a feel for everyone in the room. So if you wouldn't mind using the thumbs up tool, or you can give a thumbs up, but can you give a thumbs up if you've already edited in Lightroom? So if you've already edited in Lightroom, thumbs up. Okay, so that's maybe half. And can you give a thumbs up if you, okay, maybe majority of them, hello. A thumbs up if you would want to shoot or edit photos as if in the future as like a side gig. So as opposed to just social media, if you want to like do it to make money as a side gig in the future. Okay, so a couple. Sounds good. Okay, so let's dive in. So first thing first, if you haven't already, import the photos. So if you're on the mobile, it'll look like in the bottom corner a camera with the arrow, with the plus sign. So click that. On desktop, it'll look like this add photos, and then look through your files till you find it. So you're gonna import, if you haven't already, those two files. And then can everyone give a thumbs up when you're done? So once your photos are in there, and we're gonna start with this one, this couple. So it should be called practice 1. Looks like most of us are there, so I'll go move on. So the first step, and the thing that I think of first when I see a picture like this couple photo, is I think of straightening and cropping it first. So since you guys all have it open, let's go to the crop page. So I'll slide over to Lightroom, and it's going to be in the corner right here. And Lightroom has a really cool feature, if you haven't already used it, the auto crops, or the auto straighten, sorry. So if you auto it, it'll automatically straighten for you. So that's what I do a lot. So it'll auto straighten for us. And then you can crop it to whatever you want it to be. This is like roughly already rule of thirds, so I'll leave it as is. Following along. And then I would do exposure contrast next. So right now we're not making a color or like a look yet, we're just correcting it. So in general, this is a darker photo, so I'd like up the exposure, so you can follow along, up the exposure on yours to, a place that you like. It looks a little flat to me, so I'll add some contrast. Add contrast on yours. Maybe I'll make the exposure a little bit higher. Add a little bit more contrast. It's kind of like a dialing game. And you can also mess with the highlights. Maybe I'll like bring the highlights down to bring back some of the detail on his pants over here. I'm looking at his pants. And then maybe I'll bring the blacks down a little bit. So, just kind of whatever looks good to you. But to me, roughly that looks good. So then the next step would be to adjust your saturation and your vibrancy. So if you go down to the color page, saturation and vibrancy will be here. And these are like pretty basic corrections. For me, a lot of the times I'll just do like a vibrancy of 10 and a saturation of 10. And I'll normally start in that ballpark. And normally for me that works. You can increase it or decrease it. So that's saturation and vibrancy. And then lastly, adjusting the temp and tint. So that's how cool or how blue your image is. So this was shot at sunset, so it kind of has that warm look already. If I wanted to add more, then maybe I'll add more and make it more sunset colored. Or if I wanted to make it more cool, then I could bring the slider over to blue. I think that looks fine. And then temp and tint, can add pink, that's drastic, add green. I think that looks fine there too, so it looks pretty good. So at this stage, we've finished correction. It's just the look is there. We've corrected for anything dark, and this is the before and this is after. So we've already made like pretty significant changes. That's the before and that's the after. So where you're at is just like the correction stage. Does that make sense? Does anyone have any questions about just the basic corrections to an image? Anyone have any questions? Feel free to unmute yourself.
What did you click on to see the before and after?
I clicked on the desktop, I clicked the / key.
Oh, I see. Okay. Thank you.
Yeah. On the mobile, if you just hold on, like click and hold the picture, that works too. And if there's no other questions, I'll move on to like the next level of steps. Okay. So again, this was just the correction stage, just correcting for anything that's like too dark, too bright. But the next level is really where things get to polishing. So this is where you really focus on color and like stylizing the color and then finishing, like making it look pretty. So for this part, I'm just going to show you how to use the tools so you can just watch, and then we're going to do it all together after. So I'll just show the basics of these tools. So for instance, if I was using this picture, say I already did, those first 4 steps, I already cropped it, I already fixed the exposure, it's even now, I fixed the saturation and the vibrancy, the white balance or the temper tint looks good to me. Now I'm ready to like get in there and make it look stylized. So one of the things I'll use is called the point curve, and it's over here. So this you can use to like really start to dial in with your look. So something that's popular to use is called an S curve. And that's if you drag these points and like create the look of an S like this, you see the shape of an S. So that's one thing, it kind of is moody. You can already see like it's more contrasty. Another thing I do most of the time is I'll make like this gentle kind of like C curve, and that makes it like, give it that kind of light and airy look. So that's what I do most of the time. So that's just the point curve. You can play with that more. Another tool is called the color mixer with HSL sliders. So if you go into the color, then this is the color mixer and you can choose a specific color. One that I do a lot is green, like for this picture. So you can really adjust the hue of the color, like make it more green, make it more yellow. You can adjust the saturation. You can do this a lot with skin tone to like give a more warmth to the skin. So that's the color mixer. Another one is to use masks, and you can use a mask to make the subject pop. So if you go over to the mask tool, one I use a lot is the radial gradient. And if I draw a circle over him, then I can like make him pop out by upping his exposure. And we'll try this again in our example, but just kind of showing you guys the tools. Another one I use a lot is the brush tool. So still under masking, but it's called the brush. And say if I wanted to make the sky blue, I could like color in the sky roughly and then add tint or temp, and then I could make the sky blue. So that's with the brush tool. You can also do this with skin, which we'll do after. Healing to like remove blemishes, or for this example, these like ugly poles. So in the end, it looked like, I guess I took it away. In the end, these poles were gone, so it looked clean. So when we delivered this to the Add to a Farm to School campaign, it looked like a clean image for their banner without the poles. So healing would be going into this Band-Aid tool. It's called healing. And if you like zoom in if you trace over what you want to get rid of, it does a pretty good job of automatically selecting. So you can like cover that with, you know, trees or something. So it looks like, oops, sorry. So it looks like the pole was never there. So you can do that with like skin, blemishes, and we'll practice with that. And then the last are effects, details, and optics. Those get a little bit more specific. So if this is like easy peasy, we can go into this after, but for now, just like know those are there. The main one, if anything, I would use is in optics to enable lens correction, depending on what kind of camera you're shooting with. This just kind of like adjusts for the aberrations that are on the corners. So go into, these are just like some examples. So this is an example of using the HSL tool to change the greens. If you can see here, like the greens are kind of like an ugly green. I don't know, like I didn't like it as much, but if you see here, the greens are a lot more stylized. And this isn't for everyone, but they wanted kind of more of like a Vogue stylized green look. So the greens are muted and desaturated. And if you look at the yellows in the window, they're a little bit warmer. So that's an example of changing with the HSL sliders. And then this is an underwater photo. So this is an example of masking. So if you look at the sand, there's a mask at the bottom to get rid of that like teal color in the sand and make it basically desaturated so there's no color and it's clean white. And then there's HSL at the top to change that blue to a nicer like indigo blue. And then there's masking with a brush on the skin to bring back the skin because it's kind of like muted here. So like a brush tool to color in the skin and add some warmth. So we can dive in and try to put it all together. If you guys want to open the next picture, which should be this girl. So if you guys want to screenshot this, you can screenshot it too. This will be like the points we're going to work through all together right now. And feel free to stop and pause, ask questions, because this will be like the real meat of diving into this. So everyone has her loaded in. We can open up the crop first and just double check. This one looks fine. I don't think we should need to do anything, but you can auto straighten just to see. That one didn't work out, so I'll manually do it. So crop your image to whatever you want it to look like. You can put her more towards the side if you want to, or just leave her where she is. I think that's fine. So that's the first one, that's crop. And now we're going to do exposure and contrast. So again, we're just correcting it. We're not doing any look yet, we're just correcting it. A tip with shooting raw is to always shoot darker than lighter, and you can always, fix it in post. So this is shot a little bit darker to retain the detail. And now we'll bring it up. So we'll bring up the exposure. You can follow along. I'm bringing it up just till I see her face is in a good place. And then we can adjust for everything else, but just for her skin to look good. And then I'll up the contrast a little bit. Maybe I'll bring up the exposure just a little bit more and then bring the highlights down. I think that looks about okay. This is just correcting. So once you finish correcting the exposure, then we'll go to the color and adjust the saturation and vibrancy because this is a little flat. So we'll add some color. So I'll set my saturation to 10, vibrancy to 10. And that still looks a little bit flat to me. So I might just add a little bit more vibrancy. Vibrancy gives color without affecting the skin tone as much. So if you're going to change something, vibrance is a better way to go than saturation usually. So I'll increase the vibrancy a little bit, and that looks good to me at 30. But you guys, if you want a lesser look, then go for the less. And then I'll adjust the temp and tint, which to me looks okay. Sometimes if I don't know, I'll take the temp tool and like pull it really far and then dial it back in one way, or pull it really far the other way and dial it back in. But that looks about right. Same thing for tint. If you don't know, just pull it drastically one way and dial it in, or drastically the other way. Ideally, if your images were shot well, you won't need to mess with this too much. So that's temp and tint. And now, this is generally like the correction is done. So go ahead and like toggle on and off your before and after. So hold it down if you're on mobile, or click the backspace if you're on desktop and just check your before and after and see if you're happy with that. As a base, just color correction, I think that looks good. Any questions so far? No? So now we'll go into really stylizing this picture. So I'd go into color first, and just already looking at it, I personally think the greens are a little too saturated. They're more saturated than she is. So already looking at that, I know one correction I would probably make is put a mask on her to make her pop more. And probably use the HSL sliders to dial back this green, because this is like just a little bit too much. And then depending on if you like this yellow in the leaves, you could use the HSL to change that too. If we want to make this yellow look green instead, we could change that. So let's see, I'll go in first and use the green. Probably, let's see, changing the hue, taking it really far and then dialing it back in. Maybe I'll leave it somewhere around there. And then I'm going to definitely desaturate the greens a little bit because that was a little too much. Maybe somewhere around there. Maybe I'll go into the orange for her skin and see if that does anything. Maybe somewhere around there. Can increase the saturation to give her a little more color. And then use luminance. So a quick tip, luminance is really helpful when you're shooting skin tones, either like someone that's very pale, you can use luminance to like give them some tan. I mean, this is too much obviously, but give them some tan. Or if you're shooting someone with a darker skin color, you can use luminance to brighten them up a little bit. I think that's about right. So this is the toggle on and off for the HSL. It's really subtle, but if you look at her face, I'm toggling it off and on, you can see that she has a little bit more warmth to her face. And if you look at the greens, you can see that there's a little bit less, but it's subtle. So you can keep toggling it to see if that's what you like. I think I'd probably go to the mask now. So go to your mask, and I would put a radial gradient over her. You can try that out. And then you could increase the exposure just a little bit. Try to increase the contrast. Sometimes upping the whites helps a little bit. Maybe I'll pull the highlights down because that's a little too much. And then this would be without and with. So it's like really subtle again. Any questions about using the mask tool? Has everyone got it? Okay. So the next thing we're going to try is if you zoom into her skin. I mean, she's in middle school and I didn't have very good skin in middle school. So we're going to help her out a little bit. So we're going to use the brush tool. So open the brush and we're going to give her some smooth skin. So click the brush tool. You can change the size of this selection. So right now I'm going to color in her skin and then we're going to soften it to kind of smooth out any blemishes. So I'm just coloring pretty much all the way around her skin, avoiding her eyes since that's the part that we want to keep sharp. Sometimes I'll take it down to the neck, like the way ladies no makeup, you like blend all the way down. So blending it down to her neck. And then once everyone has that highlighted, the magic is in texture and clarity. So if you bring down the texture and you bring down the clarity, I mean, this is too much, but do you see this difference? We've really let me bring it back, blended her skin. So this is the before and that's after. So we've like cleared out any of the bumps or blemishes on her face. And this is with texture and clarity all the way down. So this is probably too much. If we zoom out, you can tell that she's airbrushed and we don't want it to be obvious. So once we zoom back in, I'll probably put it about halfway and kind of play with the amounts. There's no set thing, but kind of seeing what looks best. Anyone have any questions about this? Did everyone make it here? Everyone beautified her skin? Cool. So this is one of my favorites, especially like shooting couples, you know, if the girl has, you know, a pimple she's concerned about, this will really help. If there's something that is noticeable, like see this little pimple by her eyebrow, that one is still there. So you could use the heal tool that we used earlier. So you can click on the Band-Aid, or a shortcut is to use H, and we'll make it really small to just to cover that zit, and then click on it, and it should find itself. So it's gone now. So that's another trick. Sometimes if I want to be really nitpicky, I'll like zoom all the way in like this, and you can really like zoom in just for like these tiny zits. These are really good for like if you do shoot professional headshots and someone just happens to have a zit that day, you know. A rule of thumb is we'll edit away things that are gonna be gone next month. So like a zit's gonna be gone next month, you know, like if there's a hair blocking their face, that'll be gone next month. But if it's like a birthmark, something that's there for life, you would keep that there. But stuff like zits or, you know, hairs in the way, you take that out. Yeah, so that was like a trick to smooth out skin. So now we look at the before, and this is the after, and you can toggle on and off. One thing you could do is go into effects and add a vignette. That's not going to be for every, you know, look, but if you wanted to, you can, you know, make it pretty intense, or you can dial it back. If it was kind of like at the beach and like airy, you might want to add it in the opposite way, and that kind of sometimes gives it like an airy, cool, like kind of filmy look. And then also if you're going for the filmy look, adding grain, it's kind of nice that Lightroom has it in here. So sometimes if I'm doing like a black and white look, then I'll add the grain just to make it look like extra filmy. And then it's just the final finishing. So you're kind of looking back and reassessing the image. I think I might add a little bit more vibrance personally, just to pop it a little bit more. And then as the last thing, because she's holding up that fruit, then maybe I'll add a mask just to that little fruit to make that pop. So I go in, add a radial gradient. You can also press R as a shortcut to add a radial, and then kind of just put a little bit of emphasis on that fruit. So I'm upping the contrasts. I'm upping the whites, take it too far. You go up the shadows, so make it pop just a little bit. So those are just the basics, you know, like taking a photo from beginning to end. We corrected it first, and then we, you know, adjusted the color. We added some finishing, like smoothing her skin, adding a mask to her. And then the final step would be to export. So if you haven't exported it before, it's this arrow in the top corner. Normally I like to do custom settings. So say if you're just gonna, you know, test export it to your computer or your phone right now. And then down here, you can customize the name. So say if you're delivering to a brand and you wanted it to say like Nike, and you wanted to number it like 1 to 30, then you can, you know, label Nike and start at 1, so that everything looks a little more professional. It has a name to it instead of like DCC003 or whatever. It like looks professional. Or you can make this your name, you know, like Priscilla Photography 01 or whatever, and make sure that it's at full size, because that'll be the best quality. And then you can export. So if you want to export that, then that is basically taking it through from 0 to 100, basically. You know, we started here, ended here. So kind of shifting back to the presentation, I'm gonna give a couple like how-to tips if you want to take it a step further and get specific looks. You know, we're almost out of time, but hopefully this, you can screenshot it and like use this in the future. So this is like the visco faded moody look. People use it a lot for like moody social media posts or like music videos. It's like dark and kind of grungy, but if you look at the blacks, they're not true black, they're brought up a little bit. And if you look at the whites, they're not true white, so it's a little less contrast. Well, the contrast isn't pushed as far. So those are some tips of things you can try. A lot of it's just trial and error. So, you can screenshot and try later. This is the light and airy look. So this works really well for brand photography, for family photos. It's like very well lit. So you're probably using a lot of masks to get rid of any shadows in the corner, making sure that the whites aren't too bright. Like even if you look at her whites in this wall, it looks white, but it's not true white. And the shadows aren't too dark. Like if you look at the hair here, or even her hair, even though it's black, it's not like true black. So those are some tips you can try. These are all from Pexels. So if you want inspiration, I like to go on Pexels.com a lot. And then this is a vibrant Hawaii look, which is like pretty popular for lifestyle brands, like swimsuits, or Kelly works with cars. If you ever shoot for Kelly and shoot Toyota or something, this is kind of like that. This image looks like it could be something in like a car commercial or like a car shoot. It also works a lot for like couples photography, like vibrant, true to life, but like kind of warm. So you can, do some of these tips to try it out. A lot of it is just trial and error. And lastly, since some of you said that you wanted potentially to do paid work, here are just some numbers that I've seen. I'm all about paid transparency and trying to get into side gigs, side hustles. So if you ever want to do it, this is roughly the costs or the pay that you're looking at for things like engagement photos, family photos, doing weddings. This is just what I've seen. Obviously it's different and everyone can negotiate for different prices, but that's roughly it. Yeah, you can read through. The main thing that I would say is, I think what a lot of companies are looking for, if you like photo editing, is for people to edit wedding photos. Because if you can imagine, at the end of a day, there's like 3,000 photos and they have to get that to a couple. So if you ever want to edit photos, roughly they charge like 25 to 45 cents per photo. But the company oftentimes will give you a base grade. So they give you like, hey, this is the grade, this is what it looks like. You just like copy it and put it onto multiple photos. So if you can do, 100 photos in an hour, that's roughly 25 an hour. Or obviously that's like at the lowest rate, you can negotiate higher. But if you're interested in, shooting or editing photos, those are like kind of the rough rates. Engagement in couple photos will definitely make you more. But if you're starting out, then those are kind of like rates you can look at. So thank you. Does anyone have any questions? I know that was a lot to cover.
Okay, no questions in the chat either. If it did feel like it went by, sorry. Yeah, go ahead.
Sorry. That underwater photo that you showed previously, how long did it take you to edit that?
That took a while, probably an hour at least. It was a lot of fidgeting, yeah. So
very cool.
There's, thanks, yeah. So there's multiple masks. I know like the bottom, basically the same thing happened along the whole, bottom, it's all desaturated, but different parts of the sand needed different levels of adjusting. Like if you look on the side, it's a little brighter, and on this side, it's a little darker. So there's like multiple masks built in. But yeah, water photography in general takes a long time. So I give props to people that do that as their full job.
Thank you.
Yeah. Any other questions or looks you're curious about or things that you try to edit?
Yeah, but if it did feel like it went by really fast, it's probably because it did. Oh, actually, Jay said food in chat. So I guess, do you have any food tips?
Tips. I think, so actually, let's see if I have one in here. So this is actually from a picnic that Lauren put together. Lauren, our president last year. And if anything, I would say using masking a lot to make the food pop. So in this bottom corner, there's a mask around the entire plate to bring it out. And then there's a mask around just the jam. Because to me, when I looked at the photo, the jam seemed like kind of the focal point. And then you look at the hands. So there's a mask there too. But yeah, definitely using a lot of masks to like really center the audience attention on what you want. And then if you're shooting food especially, then like don't be afraid to up the vibrancy or the saturation. because with skin tone, you kind of have to be careful with upping too much saturation because you don't want to look like Oompa Loompa. But with food, like to our eyes, kind of like the more vibrant the food, the better it looks to us. So don't be afraid to like really increase the saturation, the vibrancy, or add warmth. Like the way McDonald's, everything looks like warm. It's not cool. It's like orangey. So definitely add warmth to the food photos.
Okay, Jaren asks, do you have any tips for organizing and storing pictures and content? I would imagine you take a lot of pictures.
So for me, when I first started, I would like, it's called culling when you go through the photos and choose what to keep. I would take a really long time like analyzing the photos and like, do I like it? Do I not like it? And I think I really had to realize for me that's just like not sustainable. So now I literally force myself to click through it really quickly and just do like a one touch like gut feeling. Like, do I like it or do I not like it? And what I do is within Lightroom, if you click X on the desktop, that's to flag it. And then, sorry, no, is it X? Z is to flag it, and then X is to discard. So I'll just go through an entire album, and if I like it, I'll press Z and keep going. Like click, 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 Z, click, 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 Z, and just go through it really quickly. And normally your gut instinct, I think, is correct. So by the end of going through that, I don't know, 600 photos, I normally end up with like 150, which is exactly what you want. So yeah, I would say try not to overthink it or overanalyze too much, but go through it, see like what you like, and then just click Z. And then after that, if I want to do a final pass to do selects or something like that, then I'll use the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So if you look up here, you can star for like your preference. So say I go through an album and I select these two. Then if I go to the top, I can say only show me the ones I've selected. And I've selected these in the past, so now it only shows me what I've selected. And then if I want to do selects again, then I'll do it with the stars. So I'll like star this one, give it 5 stars. I click the 5. And now if I go to 5 stars, this one shows up. So that's like a really fast way for me to call through and select. And then once the shoot is done and I've delivered to client, they've approved, then I'll delete everything that I didn't star, just so that I've kept everything that they like. And if they need it in the future, I can give it to them. But I'm not saving like 3 gigs of footage of, photos that are not good.
Okay, and then we have one from Melissa. Do you do all of your edits solely in Lightroom, or are there some that you like to bring into Photoshop?
For what I do, I pretty much do everything in Lightroom. I haven't needed to do anything in Photoshop. Photoshop has gotten really good. Lightroom has gotten really good at like healing blemishes and all that stuff. And that's basically the extent of what I do. But for other work outside of delivering photos to clients, then I'll need Photoshop to like isolate layers. But yeah, typically for editing photos and delivering to client, I don't normally need to. And I don't think most people would ever need to for like weddings or couples, even brand photography, depending on what it is. Most of the time, yeah, I wouldn't need to. I will say, if you're someone that likes to add like lens flares, that's not so my style, but if that's something you would want to do, then that's definitely something you would do in Photoshop. Like adding a lens flare after the fact, adding like, like a lot of grain or like a specific kind of film look, then that would be in Photoshop, yeah.
Okay, any more questions? We still have Chloe. None? Okay, if you do have, feel free to email at tohawaii@gmail.com and we'll see if we can get an answer for you.